Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you leading-edge astrology conversations through a journey of soul growth patterns connecting astrology's energetic cycles. Get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, leading edge conversations. And it is October 10th. We're bringing on a panel of Planet Buzz today, and our subject is going to be what's occurring right within the hour and tomorrow, Saturn, our planet of structure and authorities, rules, going direct after its 4.5 month sojourn in apparent retrograde motion, as it does every year. It's very significant that it works with our goals, our entire goals. There's so much to say, and I'm going to let Planet Buzz do the talking. We are now ready for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on planetary ecliptic orbital cycles and planetary pairs called synodic cycles connecting the planets at the same degree that begin our relationship, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Lesley Francis, author of the 2019 and 2020 Llewellyn Sun Sign books, a practicing professional astrologer intuitive, a lecturer, and host of my own podcast, Coloring Outside the Box. My lifelong search to understand what it is to be human led me to develop my own approach to astrology called purpose-centered astrology. I passionately seek to support people in their greatest act of creativity, living life, through consultations and webinars. Creator of star cards, I love talking and making people laugh.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tadd. I have a Ph.D. in human science and work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with people around the world. I teach and lecture on astrology both in person and remotely. I have a blog. I have written for the Mountain Astrologer, Celestial Vibes, and Tarot.com. Additionally, I am the educational coordinator for Live Life Resources, an educational nonprofit specializing in resiliency training, education, and research.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
As below, so above. As above, so below. Thank you, Hermes. Yes. The great truth sayer, you might say, and trickster of us all. What you see isn't always what we get, I guess. It's Philip Wilson might have said. So Saturn, just as specifics to start with, on the 11th, today's the 10th, but I think, Laura, you were saying that it's going direct. And it started its retrograde on May 23rd. And it was 13.5 degrees Aquarius. And it's gone back to 6, almost 7, 6.53 degrees of Aquarius, meaning that all the fixed signs, and I'll recount them, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio in that range, or even a little bit beyond, which is pretty wide when you consider the orb possible 3 degrees. So if it'd be 3 degrees up to 16 degrees of those are being affected by this retrograde, which of course includes some of my planets, and I'm sure some of all of ours. And it also, maybe we want to talk a little bit about the shadow period. Is that an idea? That because it is from the very beginning, because the purpose of this, which I might just quickly inject, is that we're wondering what has gone on since the Saturn retrograde. What's going to shift and resolve? Because there's a lot of collective issues surfacing around, and we'll be talking about that besides the personal too. But just as far as the time period that we might be looking at, okay, so we know that it was May 23rd, up until now, which is 4.5 months later in October. But when that started was back in February, the 15th of February, when it first started at that degree of almost 7 degrees, 6 degrees Aquarius. And then it inched up until May, went retrograde back to 6 degrees. And now it's going to inch up again. I say inch up because it is way out there in our solar system beyond Saturn. It's the groundbreaker. No, it is Saturn. Thank you, Sue. It's in Aquarius. Gosh, I'm way out there and I got lost with myself. Please forgive me. Anyway, it's Saturn, our timekeeper. And Saturn is going to complete its orbital path to once again visit finally 13 degrees and 31 minutes to be exact in Aquarius on January 15th. So the entire process takes about a year, which is pretty routine. But it means that the first time we encounter events, then we recalibrate them or digest them. I know the cow has 3 stomachs. It takes a lot of cutting, cud and digesting. And gosh knows, with all the planets having been retrograde and slowly going forward with our motion, there's so many activities happening, which we can talk about. So then again, hopefully we'll have time to kind of see how it could play out. So does anybody want to talk about this shadow path or anything like that by itself? Maybe? No? I kind of covered it, did I?
Well,
go ahead, Lesley.
No, you go ahead, Laura.
Well, I tend to, the way I explain shadow periods to clients and even to part of the retrograde is like when you're sweeping, right? And so you sweep up the dirt and then you have to do another pass and then you do a final pass, right? And so that's part of what we'll be moving into after tomorrow, where, so today Saturn doesn't turn direct, but it stations, right? So it appears that it's standing still. And because it's Saturn, it's for a few more hours than with Mercury, it's a couple of hours, right? It's like 3 hours when Mercury stations. But Saturn, it's like almost a day that it appears that it's not moving at all. And then it starts moving forward. But so these shadow periods it's like we haven't, whatever with sweeping, whatever was going on that first pass, we have to revisit. And just looking at what's been happening, Saturn representing in part authority and discipline and those types of and structure, right? As Rick Levine says, sort of all ST words in English are Saturnian. So that the structure that has been in place throughout most of this year is being reevaluated and recalibrated. And we see that happening globally in terms of politics. And so I do think that that's part of it, because of it being in Aquarius. Then it's this balance of Aquarius being humanity and the collective. And so the group and authority and who has authority within a group or over a group, and that being in, part of why we're not done yet. We don't know what the shadow will all represent because we've got several months of Saturn catching up to where it was when it went retrograde in May. And so there's more to be revealed.
I love it. Lesley, I'm eager to hear your take on all this too.
Well, I'm probably going to talk about it more from a personal point of view. I often see what people call the shadow period as an internal period. So it's an invitation to go within and sort of ask yourself some important questions about, what is the structure in your life? What is the foundation? in your life. And what about it requires pretty much what Laura was saying. What about it needs, in a sense, to be spruced up? I mean, I suppose you could call this a renovation period if you wanted to. And that applies both physically, both externally and internally. So when I'm talking about it from an internal perspective, I'm talking about our personal experiences. And we're going to find that often what we see externally in the world may very well mirror what's going on inside us, the back and forth about, and in lots of ways, what's real and what's not. We've had, since January 2020, a lot of back and forth about what's real and what's not. And of course, because Saturn is the ruler of the third dimension, the gravity and all the things that go along with being in a physical body, there's been a lot of tension around, again, what's real and what's not. But that also applies internally, like reframing where you might be going in your life, taking these experiences and looking at how they impact you internally. We know that there's a lot of information around about how this has impacted people in terms of learning, in terms of the depression, and those are the personal manifestations of the kinds of things that we're talking about. And I can sure tell that Mercury's retrograde because I feel like I'm circling the drain.
Oh, Lesley and Laura, I just value both of you so much. I have been jotting down these because it's absolutely true. The 2 points, I guess, that I'm thinking is the global politics and the fact that it mirrors our personal mirrors. And that's exactly what Hermes was saying when we begin. It's such evident. And is it real or not? And so it is an invitation on every level. It is so true. So here we have, yes.
And I do think, part of it, just thinking back. So the last time, the last series of Saturn being in Aquarius 28, 30 years ago was essentially the invention of the internet, right? That's when that technology really was on board for the masses, right? Versus, just being used by the military or small, pods of people, but really available to the collective at a global level, and the World Wide Web birthing out of that. And I think that's part of the collective, Aquarius is about invention. It is about technology. And so I think that there is a piece of this too, of accountability around technology. We've invented this thing that we don't know how to control.
Yeah, it's looking at consequences, like, thinking of the recent, the whistleblower from Facebook is a good example.
I think that's
right?
Part of this.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And looking at what the impact is and the consequences. And of course, for me, Aquarius isn't as much about groups as it is about community. However, we've seen a huge polarization in terms of people aligning themselves over here and not wanting to listen to anybody who doesn't agree with them.
And claiming authority through the technology.
Yes.
Right.
Which,
go ahead, Sue.
Well, I was going to say absolutely. And then that begins to get involved with all these other energies that are also adding like a stew pot into this whole factor, because we have Uranus, of course. It is, Aquarius, we start going into astrology dispositors and then how they're acting and what, so that would involve other, the polarization. But this whistleblowing and the community, I think this is, along with the space, there's several subjects here that just stand out, and it is expanding this idea that we are global. And that was a wonderful reminder that the internet was, because always looking back at the last cycle of the communication. So here we have this ability to communicate with everybody, and not just, and more so with Zoom and webcams and all of this. So it's visual. It's not just typing. We went from DOS to almost like a visual Mac out to everybody maybe. But my point is that the virus started to unite us in a uncomfortable way, and still is, we might say, but a necessary health, that has its own. But this business of the whistleblowing with Facebook, there was the Pandora Papers, and then there was the whistleblowers. One was Facebook, and about that's being manipulating. We could all go back to Pluto with this, you might say, square Eris, in a sense that we talked about last time, that's in this backdrop of realizing, playing off of our natural tendencies that, of course, we react when we get angry and we want to, and it gets complicated. And then with the Pandora Papers, that we're being manipulated also, and deceived, betrayed, you might say. I mean, really, that begins to get the feeling on a public common denominator that the welfare of the group, the communities, the commonalities are not being supported.
What could be more Plutonian than finding out about people evading taxes?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And with Uranus in
Taurus,
the sudden one in value-oriented Taurus, yes, and money. Yes, exactly. But the beautiful thing is, all of this is, if we step back from the picture, looking at reasons why we are becoming more connected globally, which has its issues too, but it's just a factor. We have this Earth that we're all concerned about. Hopefully, that the environment is not quite, it needs help, needs a lot of help.
Well, and also the recognition that, because Aquarius is a lot about tolerance, about accepting the multiplicity of peoples and, everything that we sometimes use to define ourselves. And then we realize that, in order to be a community, we have to go beyond what defines us and understand what defines other people. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's all air, and it's related in that grand trine with Libra, which is self and others in comparison. Understanding. It's not just partnership. It's like, who am I related to that? And am I projecting? And are we complementing, or are we, are polarized? There's all of that. So yes, it does make a big difference. And Laura, you had mentioned too about, as we were preparing for this, about Britain, Brexit, and I think Brexit. Thank you. Which I learned. I was wondering, what does that mean? It means Britain exiting the EU, the European
Union. Yeah.
Union. Thank you. And of course, we know that it was a 50-50 split, pretty much like the polarization that we're all experiencing globally. It seems and
the Brexit saga has been years, right? I mean, they held the vote with Mars retrograde, and when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, this is not going to go smooth." But when it passed, Mars was retrograde. But what's been showing up more recently, so we've been hearing here in the States, and probably you as well, Lesley, in Canada, right? There's chip shortages and material shortages and product shortages because so much is manufactured in China and so many plants, even lumber in the States was way backordered because all these mills shut down in 2020. And now we're showing, and it's showing up in the States now too, a shortage of gasoline, or petrol, as they call it in the UK. And gas prices in Georgia just jumped 20 cents a gallon, like in the last week. And what's happening in the UK is not, and it's true here as well. So the prices are going up and the shortages are not because they are there's a shortage of supply, but a shortage of truck drivers to get the gas to the stations. And in the UK in particular, part of the problem has been the pandemic and people quitting their jobs, and so they don't have as many truck drivers. But it's been compounded by the fact that something like 20 or 30 of the 100,000 truckers they lost in the last year and a half were not British citizens. So 30,000 of them were Europeans who can no longer work in the UK because of Brexit.
I do remember reading something about this. Wow. It was so intriguing to see how the bonds that would tie, which is very eighth house. Well, I think to myself of the nodes right now, the lunar nodes that are still leaving as they're in the last couple, until middle of January. There's still the last part of North Node in transportation-oriented Gemini and different cultures of Sagittarius with the South Node. So
that's just a practical example of why that was such an ill-advised decision. It's like, and people warned that they were going to find themselves in a hole of some kind, and maybe that's just the beginning.
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah, but, I think other supplies are limited too, but they're having long lines at the pumps because there's a gas shortage, but not because of a lack of supply.
I went to have air put in my tires at my dealership because I refused to pay for air.
Thank you.
And there are no cars. Yeah. There's hardly any vehicles in their lots because they're all in containers somewhere.
Yeah. It's the same thing in the States. They're saying, don't buy new, don't buy used, because everything is so inflated right now because of a lack of supply that, they're charging for used vehicles what they would have charged for a new vehicle 2 years ago. Give you an
example, I just had a subfloor put in my basement and they lifted the furnace, right? And I decided that it would be a good idea to put it on a platform. The cost of the platform, it's not that big. I mean, it didn't cost a lot of money, but the price doubled. The price doubled since April because all of a sudden the price of sheet metal's gone through the roof.
Yeah. So I do think that that's part of all of this. The Saturn piece, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there was so much talk about an economic global reset, but nobody thought it would come in the form of a pandemic.
Very true. We had no idea. I have a friend in Mexico, a lady who actually had, I knew her in Arizona. We were with the airline business and on the ground, not up in the air. And then she recently moved to Hawaii and returned back to Mexico, where she's an expat, as we could call it. And she was just relating to me that there's a shortage of finding gardeners, not gardeners, but maintenance people, that they're having a similar problem with having help, finding people to work. And they don't have subsidized incentive monies given to people, which I found very fascinating, which I don't know if we as on a social level, I'm thinking it's not anthropology, but anthropological maybe viewpoint, why, would I be using that right? Why we're experiencing the tremendous difficulties. I know that here in the United States, people need to work at home. Their children may be not going to school, or else they're too little to get shots if they are going to give them shots, or else they don't want to give them shots and they don't want to expose them to people. And it's complicated. When you start breaking down a system, and Saturn, our timekeeper that likes things regular, is in this let's break the rhythm Aquarius, because it is a very irregular planet on its side going backwards. Yeah, it's tricky. the space. We have a couple of minutes. Let's talk a little bit about space, because during this time, talk about innovation, both Musk and Bezos.
No, it was Richard Branson.
And Elon Musk and
all
Bezos.
Three of them. I guess I missed the Elon Musk one. Sorry about that.
He's a big one. He has, in fact, he's got this other thing that he's called the Star Rocket or something, and it's going to go to Mars eventually, and it's huge. But
I won't be going.
No, I'm not either. Thank you. I might just say, this was wonderful. I'll come back in the next life and figure it out then. I've given a lot of thought to that. I have. So, yes, but space is something that's also become a public affair. It's not just the elite of trained authority people. In other words, it's not just
well,
the
it's
astronauts.
Still pretty elite. You've got to be a multi-millionaire to go up. And maybe you don't have to be an astronaut, but you've got to have a lot of disposable income.
Yeah, although there were a few, I think, that did win a lottery or something of that. I forget which of these multi-millionaires. It could have been Musk or Bezos that offered it to the common
but the
persons.
ticket to join the lottery was millions.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay,
So.
yes. It's like all benefactors. Yes, but there is potentiality that this will become, on some level, an experience that you don't need to be trained to go to school. That there's other methods of. It's beginning to expand the horizons. That's what I meant, right?
It's an interesting thing because Musk has this project in place, the Starlink project.
Yes.
Right. And I'm so conflicted about it because the idea is to put hundreds of satellites in the sky so that everyone has access to internet. And you don't need to worry if you're in the middle of nowhere in Nova Scotia or the desert in Africa or in LA, and everybody could have the same speed, which would solve a lot of global problems in terms of the digital divide and how that affects economies. But I don't want the sky littered with satellites. I'm an astrologer. I want to be able to see the star. I took a picture of Venus and the moon the other night. I want to be able to see that.
I agree. I've also been very conflicted with that whole process, and just the idea way back when micro stoves were so much stronger, and people said stay away from the radiation, which I'm still not quite so sure about because it's reduced. But the idea of and then a 5G compared to 4G, but it's all this electronic vibrational energy that we don't know about. We will come back. Unless, Lesley, we're just past a half hour. Did you have a thought you wanted to share? Okay. With Dr. Laura Tadd and Lesley Francis and myself, Sue Rose Minahan, Talk Cosmos, Planet Buzz, October 10th, back with Saturn in its outrageous Aquarius strata. Be back.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Libra, ruled dually by Venus. By leaving the lower hemisphere of the self, the energy of Libra enters the arena where the completed self meets the other than self to form a relationship based on partnership. As a cardinal air sign on the descendant angle, represented by the equinox of equal light, Libra's energy learns through comparison and relationships, with the intention to integrate duality and polarities.
Are you curious about the phase of the moon you were born under and what that might reveal? Join Lesley Francis, professional astrologer, intuitive, author of the 2019 and 2020 Llewellyn Sunshine books, and host of her own podcast, Coloring Outside the Box, in a 4-week workshop titled Lunar Rhythms, using the phases of the moon for self-awareness and practical planning. Sponsored by the International Academy of Astrology, this class introduces you to each of the 8 phases, their characteristics, purpose, impact, and how they can be used personally to navigate your life. And you'll also learn how to identify the phase you were born under and how to access the power and potential of each phase so you can create a life more effectively lived. And if you are in any way fascinated by the moon, then this webinar is for you. A knowledge of astrology is not a prerequisite, just your date of birth. The webinar begins Thursday, October 14th, and lasts for 4 weeks from 5:30 to 7 p.m. Pacific Time. And for more information and to register for the webinar, visit astrocollege.org and scroll down to find the Lunar Rhythms webinar under upcoming events at IAA.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. The show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Greetings. This is Karen Winterland, astrologer at seattleastrologer.com, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we understand how to implement our free will through the cosmos.
Alternative Talk 1150, online at 1150kknw.com.
Well, hello. This really will usher in, after that wonderful ad about your class there, Lesley, how, in fact, I'm going to bring up the chart because let's talk about where this is in our
own charts and how we maybe are seeing it manifest.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not doing 2 things at once very well, am I? Okay, here we are. Now, this is the chart as of October 11th, for those on the podcast, 2021, in the evening at 10 o'clock, 17 minutes in the evening, p.m., Eastern Daylight Time.
So this is when Saturn goes direct. Is that what you've pulled it up for instead of right now?
Yes.
So people are not confused. Today is the 10th. We're looking at the 11th because that's when Saturn goes direct.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. So, and I could have done it on a, well, that's fine. That's what it is. So we'll pull this up for a while. As far as, Lesley, perhaps let's start with you. Put you on the spot, but
why are you picking on me?
I know. Well, here it is in the 11th house. Saturn. We're talking about Saturn at this point of direct, and of course, it's in the 8th house here. So I don't really know if this is maybe I'll stop sharing at the moment. It's
a valid chart if you're looking at the state of affairs in your country. In the United States, that's a valid chart.
Yeah, but we'll go back to that then. Let's just talk about where it is in our charts.
I was just, because I hadn't looked at it. I was just looking at it to see what kind of relationships it had with the other planets. But we can do that after. Yeah. Apparently, Mercury is getting on my nerves again.
Well, I apologize. I understand. We are in Libra, and it is that. With Venus, it's a complicated thing. I've thought, and I'm going to diverse. If we go into the complexities of astrology, it is a matter of looking at different energies. And when it comes to Libra and Taurus with Venus, because Venus rules both of those, they are not one's relationship with other, but I'm beginning to lose my train of thought, darn it. But the point is, it's not clear. Go ahead, Laura.
I was just going to say, just for Lesley, as you're thinking about how it's manifesting in your chart, Venus and Saturn are sextile, is one of the closer. It's not aspecting a lot very tightly, but with Venus, it'll be 5 Sag tomorrow. And then
so it's an applying sextile.
It's an applying sextile.
Well, that usually gives it more weight because the energy is still building, which is nice.
And I don't Ming. Yeah.
That means
a little further, a little more of an orb that's the closest aspect.
I'm talking over top of you. My deepest apologies.
Oh, no. Okay, let's regroup. Okay, I will start off with my chart. Okay, and then we'll go further from that. Yeah, and it is in my 5th house, and this new innovative restructuring, which sounds so great, but there's a lot of work, obviously, for anybody that is aware of Saturn. You just don't build 4 corners immediately. And I'm always in awe of buildings that are straight up, especially, with a lot of the Netflix going back to the 800s or the 1200s or 14 or 1700s. And I'm talking about the different shows my husband's watching here about everything from the Medicis to King Alfred and Outlander. Gosh knows if other people have. But the point is, all the buildings are straight up. We know this. Well, it takes work. It takes a lot of coordination. So here it's in my 5th house. And I feel like just that. I'm relating and breaking down a lot and choosing what to keep and what to throw out. And it has to do with the house, not the household, but my creative interests. I don't have children. And I have a lot of creative interests. Talk Cosmos is one. And coming up with new ways to use the energy best and be truer to my vision. So it's become exciting, and it's a lot of work too. And on another way, I'm wondering if this little book club that you are both part of, that we're looking at Hermetica by Gary Caton, which has to do with Mercury retrogrades, which we're in right now. I happen to be born with, and I'm wondering, and we're wondering how to apply it. It's but that would be a creative energy, wouldn't it be? Where we're trying to look, in a sense, maybe not.
Maybe for you, it's a creative process. It would be different for each person.
Yes, there you go. Okay, then
Laura and I found a kind of Saturnian, actually.
Oh, it is. It goes. We'll scratch that. But on a personal basis, I have been writing. Oh my goodness! I've been writing ideas of what to teach. I've been writing about what to have for a retreat. I've been writing poetry. I've been writing stories. I've been writing a great deal, and also trying to figure out how to restructure some of my open slots with Talk Cosmos on different subjects. And I think one of them is to go a bit about global and power, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, it's a lot of work in progress. So,
and that's the Saturn thing.
Yes, it is. So now, Dr. Tadd, Laura, perhaps you'd like to go next.
Okay.
And then
Well, Saturn, it's in my 2nd house, but it's been in my 2nd house for a long time, because I have a 12-degree Capricorn cusp of the 2nd house. So since Saturn got halfway through Capricorn several years ago now, it's been in my 2nd house. So that's not a new experience. So it's more sort of reflecting on the Aquarian piece that's only been this year, and it doesn't get out of my 2nd house till it is almost out of Aquarius. But so what I value, right? And what's important to me, my personal resources, but I also tell clients often, like, culturally, we get the idea that personal resources are tangible, physical, monetary resources, but it's greater than that, because what are the natural gifts? What are our natural resources, the natural abilities we came into the world with? And that all has been getting really sort of reconfigured and reinvented for me, really. And it's interesting to think since June. So, right. So if we look at it with May being the start of this retrograde, because I've been working as an editor for a nonprofit in Vermont that's integrating the chakra system into teacher training. And I'm restructuring their teacher training manual and rewriting their teacher training manual. And having this authority around this cutting edge information, which is that Aquarian piece, using a skill set that's very weird for me to have because I'm severely dyslexic. So the idea that I'm somehow the expert and the really good writer of this material has been an interesting process of like, I'm the one making it really clear, but I'm the one who needed help with my writing my whole childhood and all through school because I'm dyslexic. So it's been very interesting to see how that has manifested for me. And I think too, with the values piece, then like where you put your energy, standing by your values with it, for me, with it going through the second house of, with in the States, the potential strike that's going to happen with the television and film industry. And I actually feel really excited. I think it's awesome. Every union is banding together. I think that's amazing. And that's part of my value system, being like, the collective is taking, that could be part of this, the group, the collective owning their authority and coming that, you could see Saturn Aquarius as union power potentially. And so that, and I have people, friends and family that are part of the television film industry unions. And so seeing how that affects them, and that, I don't know how much of that but possibly just because of it being my values that it is playing out in that way.
Thank you. That's very clear. Second house resources and values. Absolutely. I was thinking mine was fifth with creativity of also on a collective. Lesley, I know you started with your foundational floor, which is true, which is very symbolic, as we had talked about, and you could expand on that if you want, but also about teaching for this new, if that relates to somehow with it, because you've always been a teacher. I've taken your classes, a few of them, as I've taken both of yours. Yeah, but there is
actually,
one
I would
that,
agree with that, but carry on.
Yeah, but that wonderful class that was just advertised with the International Academy of Astrology, which by the acronym kind of goes like what? But anyway, yes.
Hey, I'm trying to do, well, of course, like Laura, I've had Saturn in the same house for quite a long time because I have 16 degrees of Capricorn on my 6th house. And when it's stationed to go retrograde, it was within about 1.5 degrees of my natal moon and a couple of degrees of my descendant. And then, so there was the energy that felt like it was going to move forward, and then it backed up. And so this year has been really a lot about, cleansing, healing, reorganizing. And in order to get the subfloor done in my basement, I had to clear out a whole bunch of stuff. The mobile paper shredder, I donated 8 boxes of paper. The mobile paper shredder. I had stuff going back to when I was in high school, but it wasn't, I had everything from high school. I just had bits and bobs from all parts of my life. I came across my divorce decree. All kinds of interesting things surfacing because Saturn is in a Capricorn, that can also have as much to do with time past, right, as the moon.
Tradition, yes.
And the other thing I found is that energetically, my energy has been up and down like a yo-yo.
I agree.
Lot of fatigue. And then, of course, because it's in the 6th house, and interestingly enough, I have Saturn in Virgo anyway. So sometimes, if anyone's listening and astrology, you might want to look at where your natal Saturn placement is just to get some further information. Well, mine is in the 2nd house. And so so interesting things have shifted in terms of how I see myself, what my values are about me, how I value myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Saturn stations to go direct, it's within a couple of degrees of my natal Venus. And so it's been a very complex year in pulling a whole bunch of different threads together in it. And yet it's funny because I joined the board of IAA and got a lot and have received a lot of respect for my areas of expertise. And so being able to show my mastery and express that part of me, but also to take on more work.
Thank you. And
Right?
let's acknowledge what IAA is. It's International Academy of Astrology. And it is the oldest school.
Yeah, it's the oldest online astrological school that they offer a comprehensive certification program. I'm just giving a little plug here. And soon my compatriot Laura will be teaching for IAA. So
yes, in January.
Yeah, so I'm very glad to make that acknowledgement. And this is, in a sense, isn't this amazing to consider that so many aspects are repeating, like you said, not just the present, but way back, because Saturn, which is the natural ruler of Capricorn, which is the structures, as I say, it just takes a long time to build a structure. We have our skeleton system as a baby and it grows, but we have the 4 stones foundations of a building. So it goes, and it's tradition. It goes way back. Why do we have tradition? Because they repeat and repeat. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think the subfloor in my basement is a perfect symbolic symbol of what the cycle is about. In other words, I did a lot of cleansing, but I built on stuff on who I am. It's not a case of starting afresh. It's more a case of paring away the things that don't work for you anymore, so you can build something new on top of who you truly are.
Authenticity. I hear that in all 3 of us, and I love it. And I think as we conclude in the last part, that really is the message, to decondition, because Saturn is conditioning. It's a necessary ingredient in order to prepare and we're getting reconditioned, you could say, through all of this collective mundane situations and personal that relate, just like Hermes, from the exterior to the internal and the internal to the exterior. I mean, it relates in
and I
ways.
think too, Saturn's about discernment, right? And so as you're cleaning out your basement, you're discerning, that sort of keep, throw out, shred, donate, sell, right? Those piles that we all create when we move or clean out a closet, and discerning, okay, what is of enough value that you hold on to it? What's of value that you could sell, but you don't want it? What's not of enough value to sell, but it would be okay, good for somebody, right? Like that's part of that discernment that I think that's part of this period too. And collectively, like, or for the community, for society discerning how we're going to move forward, right? That's
perfect.
And I think it's interesting because I just wanted to say, I think it does reflect what the I Ching says, and that is that you cannot change the world unless you're prepared to change yourself.
Absolutely. Accountability begins with the self. There is nobody else that we can change, and that is eternal message everywhere. Thank you. Let's look at this chart in the last few minutes And for those folks, once again, it's October 11th at 10:17 in the evening, Eastern time, wherever you want to be at. This happens to be Washington, D.C., just for the fact that we're coming out of the United States. But as you were speaking and had mentioned, right in the 6th house, according to this particular chart, which has very late Gemini rising, 28 degrees, 40 minutes, almost, at the very end of Gemini, almost at the solstice point, the power point. But anyway, Venus is our planet of values and relationships in philosophical Sagittarius of cultural belief systems, etc. Needing to voice our opinions is conjunct by 3 degrees to the South Node, meaning of what's part of our baggage, you could say, and we're needing to release. And so there it is. Would you agree? It's very pertinent. And what else anybody looks
she's
at?
So bright in the early night sky right now. At least here, that so bright. I got a really good photograph with the moon.
Excellent. And it would be. Thank you, Laura. I'm so glad to hear that. I've not been seeing it. We've got the VOG back again. And besides that, the time of year is hot in Hawaii. And so there's more clouds. We had clear skies, but not lately. But if we look at this chart, and I've learned to see this through Gemini Brett, with his teachings and people, is that because it's in the 6th house, if we go in the primary direction, which is how the Earth rotates. It's not around the sun, but just rotates. Venus is going clockwise, right? And so it would be, and the horizontal line is the horizon. So because it's in the 6th house, it means the sun has set, and it's within the dusk, or it's in the evening, early evening time. Right there, you can see it in the chart. So thank you for that. I'll start looking.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, we were looking at with this chart earlier, when we were talking before, and it's now a little past. It's actually going to be with Mercury tomorrow rather than this Mars-Sun conjunction. But this yod that we've got going on with Uranus, then is sextile Pallas, and then they're both quincunx in conjunct Mercury. It was the Mars-Sun conjunction just a couple of days ago. And that being, I think that may have happened, right? That was closer to when the Facebook story broke about a week ago, right?
Well, actually, would you take the opposition to Chiron?
And then the opposition to Chiron is right there too. And
so we are healing a lot of identities, our own identities, but that's absolutely how to find the common ground between authentic values with Aquarius and our thinking Mercury with relationships of self and others with, Pallas and our strategy of working with what powers we can control and what we can't control.
Control who? Okay, so there's the other thing. Is
Yes.
control not an illusion?
Yes, control nothing, create everything. That's my
In
mantra.
other words, what can you be accountable for? What can you take charge of?
And what do you just have to surrender to?
Yes, the old creed of the alcoholics, which is not a bad creed, regardless of your experience. But yes, control nothing, create everything, and work with what. And that's the gift of working with it opens up new vistas, right? Because then you see signs of metaphysical wonder. Right now, the music is telling us a metaphysical wonder that we must say adieu, adios,
sayonara.
Yeah, other languages. Well, thank you, Lesley from Canada.
Buonanotte.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the Italian one.
Or buonasera would be like, I think it's
Toodaloo.
Till again, with love.
Thank you for joining us on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests connect soul growth patterns with the energetic cycles of astrology. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.